I'd like to thank my patrons for making this video possible, especially Sullivan Theodore, who I can only describe as a lone lighthouse of hope on the tumultuous seas of the art journey. This was supposed to be a 10K celebration video, and peace, and Q&A, but by the time I painted the picture and answered the questions, it got closer to 20K. Might be at or past 20K by the time I get this up. And that's really weird. Who would have thought it could happen for an art channel where I basically don't talk about how to draw and instead focus on the soft art around drawing? That's indeed very weird. And that only gives me more reason to say thank you to everyone who is hanging around this channel. Let me do a quick summary of where this channel started and where it's going. So from the beginning, I've been trying to find ways to help people relax into their work. The early videos on this channel are the most detailed, I would say, and the later videos have become more generalized slightly. Those early videos, a block of about 30 that I posted over a year ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, take very specific mental moments that tend to happen during drawing and try breaking them down bit by bit. And that has always been the point of my channel, and I've really enjoyed doing that. I've gotten into teaching drawing straight up in a few points and more in-depth in the paid tutorials, but I've never been interested in making a YouTube channel where I pretend there's a straightforward way to teach people to draw. I just don't believe that. Art is mostly a mental battle, in my opinion, and I'm much more fascinated with that and talking about that. Not in small part because I think it's somewhat rare to hear straightforward conversation about art suffering and some of the mental moves that can help with it. And there are mental moves that can help with it. So I will continue with all of that. I find I have a lot of energy to come at that same problem from an infinity of angles. And there's other things I want to try. Ideas that I had that COVID got in the way of, and I think we'll get there. No need to spoil them, I don't think. But sitting here after a year and a half, I find I really love doing this, and I'm feeling energized to try more. Okay, I'll keep that short. I just want to say, again, in the most heartfelt way possible, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for being here. And let's jump into some questions. I will start with one that made me laugh. KB says, I have questions. Are you a Satanist or a witch? I love how unashamedly you delve into weird rambling talks or unapologetically offer uncomfortable perspectives to typical artist concerns. A lot of your videos offer a spiritual take on the creation of art as well. If you see your art practice as a spiritual/meditative thing, how did that come about? Congrats on 10K. Thank you, KB. I'm not a Satanist or a witch, no. I'm just an artist, and is there really anything weirder than that? I'd be very interested in talking to some witch and Satanist artists to see how their alignments make them view their art practice, or how it conditions certain experiences with their art. That's really what fascinates me, how broad the art practice is and how it can hold all of these other things within it. As to how the spiritual take on the creation of art came about, well, that's pretty straightforward. I experience my practice spiritually, in the sense that I find it to be a perfect ritual time to execute a sort of inward pilgrimage to my core values, the things that I feel must be true under everything else in life, those beliefs and viewpoints that I find most freeing. They are readily accessed and unavoidably put in front of me while I draw. You know, I cannot feel a drawing spontaneously, unconsciously weave itself through my fingers without being reminded that the part of myself that I self-identify with is probably the smallest, least ingenious part of me. And I cannot become truly and completely lost in flow, a rejuvenating period of raw experience that I only notice when I exit it and look back on it, without being reminded that there is no ego, no self. If it can be dissolved at all, its insubstantial nature must always be true. Flow does not cause the dissolution of the self. It reveals that the self was never there. It's a reminder. And so flow is a sacrament that reminds me of this most liberating truth. I never come out of flow feeling bad or neutral. Flow tends to leave people focused, new, sharp, and kind. Sunday morning, baby. So I believe those things, and even though it may be a little uncomfortable, as you said, I just choose to share. And I do that because I think it's important, not because I'm comfortable airing this stuff out on the permanent record or anything like that. I imagine many people find it horribly cringy, and I'm actually just serving them discomfort. But yeah, I think it's important. You know, I have an argument, a position I'm trying to put forth because I believe its counterpoint, the grinding, uncaring, quote unquote scientific art viewpoint, is a little dominant right now and is controlling too much of the conversation. I think there's good arguments against my viewpoint. I think a debate would be enriching. I just think there's too few people offering a different perspective from the art is like working out zeitgeist at the moment. All right. Thanks again, KB. Nathan Dustin asks, the school I'm currently attending has the mindset of, if you can't do it right, don't even try. This means me and all of my classmates are stuck on doing the same damn expected, ordinary design and art styles. My question is, how do you survive/improve in an art institution that discourages you from experimenting with what works and what doesn't? Thanks for the question, Nathan. That's tough. I'm sorry to hear that. Just try to remember that art schools are gossamer strings of unicorn dreams twisting on warm air currents rising from candy volcanoes with gingerbread men worshiping craven idols at their bases. Art can't be taught the way other things can be taught. Put down your diplomas. Christ, I teach drawing at one of the best design schools in the US. I know how treacherous this ground is. Calm down. There are some fundamental things about art that can be communicated objectively. The way light works in the real world, for example. But almost all artists will base their techniques on violating or twisting those truths, not following them. Even styles that stay remarkably close to objective reality are forced to compensate and make artistic concessions for the medium's failings. Nothing can replicate the real world exactly. Everything beyond these objective things, even things that seem deceptively objective, like color, are actually entirely subjective. So I don't know what school you go to or how accurate your assessment is. You might be too close to it and exaggerating how bad it is. But if I assume you're accurate, then yeah, it sounds like maybe your school is not presenting itself right or being entirely straight up with you, or I don't know, they're just a little closed-minded. I mean, look, art school is a gamble. It's a madman's gambit, okay? This is what's really happening when you go to art school. You are putting up a ridiculous sum of money so that you can borrow credibility and an identity for 4 years and attempt to figure art out for yourself in that time, while using the temporary identity to prevent an existential crisis. And that's really it. That's really all it does. If you're lucky, you go to one of the best schools, and in your whole crop of like 20 teachers that you'll study under, you'll have like 1 or 2 that you agree with who actually have the time to give you feedback. So yeah, when you finish, you just kind of continue trying to figure it out yourself, but you don't have your student identity anymore. And that's when most people quit or slow down because the existential crisis hits. So with my viewpoint made clear, how do you survive? Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Your teachers in the school, they don't have another choice. They need to play pretend and train you as if it made a lick of sense to assign grades to art, and as if it were sane to expect a certain amount of improvement in people's skills in a certain period of time. That's all nonsense, and any serious artist knows that. But they made the mistake up front of getting accredited by a collegiate board to teach art. There's no going back after that, right? You need to pretend perspective can be taught in a semester and that you should be good at it by the end of that semester, or that drawing a car in perspective is some sort of test that you can pass, and if you can do the car, then you should never mess up perspective again. Like, it's laughable once you say it out loud. But again, the trade-off is fair if you see the truth. You let the school indulge in its insanity in exchange for a 4-year identity that protects you from depression and fear. That's actually pretty fair. That actually is pretty fair when you square it up. So if it's bothering you, don't drink the Kool-Aid. You do you. If anyone takes it too personal and gets angry, just be compassionate. They think all of that art stuff is real and that it's not just about the demon of art that lives in everyone's heart. And that's a viewpoint. It's a valid one. You just don't have to let it get in your way. So find your inner steel, prove them wrong, give yourself a little bit of flex and let yourself get some low grades as you follow your gut or whatever. I did it, No one checks an MBA's grades, for the love of God. You think anyone cares about your art school grades as you move on? No one is going to be around to give you any guidance or mark how good you are in a little book the second school is over, right? Everyone's going to drop you like a ton of bricks. Get used to it now and cut your own path. Thanks again, Nathan. Cooper's Creatures asks, how often do you move on from a drawing without finishing the concept/fully rendering it? Of course, you can always go back and fix things, and some things should just be left as sketches. But do you ever feel regret for unfinished projects or drawings? Thanks, Coop. I do feel regret for unfinished projects, of course, but I try not to take it too seriously. No one is as upset as I am that I bailed on a picture, and that feeling usually indicates that it's time to carry myself more lightly. I move on from things often and quickly. It's a little difficult to know when that impulse is in balance, but I do believe that well-composed pictures kind of finish themselves. Hard to explain unless you've experienced it personally, but any picture can be finished by brute force. But pictures arranged well at their core from the start reach finish very quickly and often effortlessly. They sort of explain themselves. I think of ditching pictures often to be an education in what a well-composed picture feels like and looks like while working on it. But I do brute force my way through pictures all the time to balance it. And doing paid work forces that balance upon you in many ways. I definitely sweat bailing on personal pieces way less because I'm regularly finishing stuff for work all the time. All right, thanks again, Cooper. Vlad Mel asks, over the years, as you gain advanced knowledge of digital tools and techniques, do you ever feel overwhelmed with the amount of approaches you could take towards personal work? Expecting your final to have some advanced look because you've been an artist for so long. I look at my early work from a decade ago and feel like there's more heart in it. I used basic tools and simple brushes without expectations from myself, studios, or clients. But today, I hold myself back from doing things simply and get overwhelmed with the amount of ways to approach even personal work. If you ever felt that, how would you let go of expectation of yourself and get out of your own way? Thanks for the question, Vlad. Yeah, very, very interesting. That does happen to me. Over the years, you build up enough methods and familiarity with such a broad base of tools across all sorts of mediums that it can get pretty distracting. Yes. I'm always wondering if I should start with 3D here, maybe grab some photos there, maybe do this part traditional and then just scan it and comp it in, build a physical model or something. The possibilities are truly endless, but I think that the distraction part, to be distracted by all of that, I think that that is symptomatic of a very common problem with our world of art making, and it's the real culprit. That problem is being caught up with the how instead of the why and the what. When we're in a very improvement-focused mode, if we don't have a teacher to snap us out of it or a job to ask more of us, we can get very focused on the how for years and years, and it's usually highly inefficient. It's one of the most fun parts of being an artist, right? Trying new things and trying to crack the code of craft and figure out how people did things. It's fun, really fun, until it reaches that point where it's distracting, where it's your first concern about your work. It needs to be in balance with a deep love and connection with the content of your work as well, right? If you put the content, and I don't mean anything highfalutin about that, right? Like it could be as simple as just you love a particular genre enough that it's a bottomless source of inspiration for you. If you put that content first, it tells you what it needs, and it makes it easier to determine the hows, what's appropriate and what isn't. People who have never experienced the how-focused pipeline actually might think I sound crazy right now. They don't even get what the hell I'm talking about. But everyone who has ever rushed to the drawing table because they thought, oh, right, that's how you get a good shape, and then found themselves bored halfway into the drawing because they only cared about one little thing when they got started instead of the whole big picture, knows exactly what I'm talking about. To those of you who always sit down because you want a complete picture, and it's obvious to you that it doesn't really matter what you do along the way, as long as it gets to that end message, trust me, it's true that other people do it differently. Other people literally only start drawings because they want to see if they can make these minute, isolated aspects look better. And if you could bottle some of your big picture juice and sell it to the rest of us, that would be awesome, please. So yeah, long answer short, Vlad, balance it with connecting with your content. Put that first for a while. Try not to get mesmerized by the temptations of the surface effect and the details of execution. Tim Tran says, hi, Steven. I have one question I'd like to ask. I know I really enjoy the act of drawing, but I never really know what to draw. Any advice? Thanks for the question, Tim. Very nuanced, that issue. I think if you're enjoying drawing, that's the prime concern. In some ultimate sense, it doesn't matter what you draw if you're enjoying it. But if you feel a bit of a hole on the what issue, I would start first by looking around at what you might want to say or contribute with your art. I know that in these circles that is often frowned upon, but turn inward and see if there's a part of you that really cares about something and wants to translate it into art. People tend to think that's a little cringe, but that's silly, right? That's obviously silly. That's just a current cultural thing. Of course, you should want to add something with your art. Of course, you should have a deeply personal and resonant message that you want to communicate. It's going to take 5 to 10 years of focused practice to approach even mid-level technical expertise. So yeah, you better give a goddamn about what you're doing. But that's hard for a lot of artists. A lot of artists don't yet necessarily feel like they care enough about anything in life to dedicate themselves to making art about it. They have this depth of interest in the craft, but other things like relationships, politics, existential speculation, they don't seem to rise to the same emotional level as the joyful crafting of art. So it seems weird to say, I'll make art about loss or something like that. However, that will happen to most artists at some point. Most artists will eventually experience a trauma, betrayal, confusion, desperation, or self-loathing deep enough that it will commandeer their art. Fun! Or they will fight against that union, refuse to let it get into their art. But of course, the trauma and its repercussions are now the most interesting thing in their life, not the random design drawings for things no one is asking for. So they stop making art. Womp womp. Most don't stop forever though. They figure it out. They get the trauma or its resolution connected with their art, and then they get back to work better than ever. Best part about all of that? There's nothing you can do about it. It will just come with time as you live longer and longer. So until then, if you can't think of what you'd like to say or contribute with your work, I would say just do the challenges. Do all the art challenges that are out there. They're not my thing personally, but they'll give you a good framework to work in, and you'll have a built-in audience to show your work to. So if you're really enjoying the raw act of drawing, it shouldn't be a problem. And you'll be contributing beautiful drawings and fun to the world, which I should always restate, is enough, right? To own that you are contributing fun, beautiful drawings to the world, and that's your deep resonant message. That's a perfectly good, deep resonant message. Thanks, Tim. Serenity279 says, I've been wondering about my desire to do all the art. I guess if I were to ignore the question of why for a moment, then it becomes a what. What do I need to do to fall in love with the process, with my art, to enjoy learning, relish in the challenge? There's so much to do, and I can't brute force my way through it anymore. Thanks, Serenity. There's a little confusion in the middle of the question for me, but I'm going to focus on that last part. What do I need to do to fall in love with the process? Not a small question at all. I agree with your sentiments. You really shouldn't have to brute force your way through the huge amounts of work you're going to do on the art journey, and I don't think anyone should. Now, the problem is that I can't tell you how to move towards a more relaxed, joyous state with your art. I think that that move is ultimately personal. I believe that state can be very different for different people. For some people, that relaxed, joyous state is going to be synonymous with a sort of high pressure, high wire act that they are executing every time that they make a drawing. And then with other people, it's going to be a very low pressure, chilling kind of vibe. I think it's very different for everyone. But I can tell you, look right under your nose. What's going on down there on the paper? Is it as simple and straightforward as it appears? If you think the answer is yes, it is quite simple. It's just a drawing down there. Ask yourself why you're so sure. Take note of how often things happen automatically in art and how often you're choosing every little thing before you do it. Do you ever do that? Does one state outweigh the other? Where do your ideas come from? You know, the ones that just occur to you while you're doing something else. The ones that refuse to come when you're trying your hardest to actively think through something. What do you do with that information? Do you live from that understanding, or do you spend most of your art time backwards, forgetting what you know to be true? All of these things are doorways. They mean that the doors of interpretation in art are wide open. Nothing is in the way. If something feels off about your art practice, who could possibly be in the way of choosing something different? What is in the way of insisting upon something else? Is it you? Is it the art culture? Expectations? A story that you're telling yourself about what an art practice looks like? There is no answer for what an art practice looks like. Everyone's is supposed to be different. Yours is waiting to be plucked from an infinite field of possibilities, utterly unique from any other practice that you have seen. So how does it make sense to compare yourself to others or to need to learn the way that they learned? Ask yourself if there is something you wish you were trying or some method of learning that you wish you were doing, but you haven't done because you were scared or unsure or felt like you needed someone to give you permission to do it. And just do it. Thanks again, Serenity. Sukitha Alongavan says, Steven, where did you learn to draw and for how many years have you been practicing it? Thanks for your question, Sukitha. It's an interesting one because I've been very eclectic with my art education. I started when I was a kid by copying the art of the things I loved, games and stuff. And then I got interested in actively improving my art when I was about 13 or 14. And that started by going through classic art books, reading them, copying them, kept doing that all through high school. I took art classes in high school too, but I was learning more on my own, looking at drawing books, anatomy books, figure drawing manuals. Then I went to Art Center College of Design for a 4-year design education, and that was a lot. And all the while I was in there, even though the curriculum itself was a lot, I was also breaking out of the curriculum to do things like outside classes on traditional mediums and spending a lot of time in the life drawing studio. And then I got a job, which led to a lot of learning on the job. And I continued to improve at night and go to my workplace's life drawing. And that was probably my biggest period of improvement, I would say. So it's been a lot. God, that doesn't even, include all of the help that I got from being around my peers and asking my friends to tell me how they did things and things like that. Like, it's just so much. So yeah, it's been a lot. And if you ignore just happily drawing as a kid, which I did my whole childhood, and you start the clock at when I started actively thinking about improving instead of just drawing, then it's been about 16 years, And it's been a pretty even mix, I would say, of teaching myself and being taught by others. But there's only one true answer to where did you learn to draw, and that's on the paper, my friend. Thanks again, Sukitha. Martin says some nice things and then asks, P.S. Will there be more Gumroad lessons in the future? Those have been so helpful. Thank you, Martin. You bet there will be more Gumroads. If my schedule is right, I will have just put out the legs section of Transformational Anatomy right before this video. Thanks, Martin. Patrick Moraru says, Congrats, Steven. Can you please help me with a point of view on why I have lots of ideas for all sorts of creative pieces, but all the time when I want to do the work in order to make that piece real, I realize that it is not possible with my current artistic progress. Sorry that's all over the place. Thanks though if you get to look at it. Thanks for the question, Patrick. This happens to all artists. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Your ambition and your mental images of the works that you want to create are outpacing your mileage and your experience. There's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly natural. In fact, imagine if it was the other way around. That'd be kind of lame, wouldn't it? If I had to give a piece of general advice for the issue, I would say to try extending your preparation phase if you haven't done it before. Instead of just starting on the piece next time, put a choker on yourself and say, okay, if I want to spend 2 days on this piece, I'm going to force myself to spend 2 days preparing for it first. Gathering reference, making reference, doing any necessary sketches. This usually gives you the best odds of using your available energy with the most efficiency and could possibly push you over the quitting hump that's in the middle of most pieces. There's other interesting possibilities, though. You might be imagining your pieces, your ideas, in a style or a level of finish that you're not actually interested in doing, right? Some people won't like me saying that, but is there anything keeping that from being true? You don't really get to pick how your ideas for your pieces present themselves. They might not align with what you're interested in doing for 40, 50, 100 hours. There needs to be a balance. With experience, you'll become familiar with what sorts of ideas are short burst flames of passion, ideas that make you want to sit down at the board, but then they fizzle out halfway through. You'll also come to recognize the ones that are long haul, the ones that will actually get done. For me, the signals of which kinds of pieces are actually going to get done come way before actually starting them. For me, they're the ones that persistently reappear while I'm doing other things. But when they appear, they have some sort of design problem. There's something off about them. It comes up while I'm driving or in the shower, and I feel like I would like to do that, but something's nagging me about it. There's some like, oh, how do I solve that particular issue? So that keeps me from sitting down to it right away, but it pops in and out of my mind for weeks, months, or even years. But every one of those that has eventually popped to mind with its problem solved has always become a finished piece once it's begun. So just be open to the possibilities there. Be open to the idea that your ideas are not necessarily coming perfectly coded for translation to the art medium, right? You might need to do a little bit of work in between to get them into a place where the way the idea presents aligns with the way you actually like to work. That's not the case for everybody, but I feel like it is for a lot of artists. All right, thanks again, Patrick. Paula Lanhart says, my questions are, is it worth it going to art school or can I learn by myself? How do you get jobs when you're done studying? Also, which artists inspire you the most? Thank you again. Thanks, Paula. I think I made my infuriating opinion on art school pretty clear in one of the above answers, so I'll point you to that again. But as to, is it worth it to go? Depends on your means or what you want. I think an excellent art school is worth it for most wealthy people. I would tell people of means who are interested in being an artist, it's absolutely worth it to go to something like an art center or Yale or what have you, because a career is almost guaranteed off of connections alone. But the extravagant price can't really be justified for anyone else, I don't think. And I went to Art Center as a person without means, riding completely off of loans, who got a career out of it, and I still won't say it's a good idea. You can absolutely learn by yourself on a much smaller budget. You just need to put active work into building up your connections, since school won't hand them to you. Might I recommend being a chill person on all of these Discord servers that are around now? Which is the answer to how to get jobs when you're done studying as well. You can get jobs off of portfolio alone. You just need to either angle your portfolio to a very specific market or be ultra famous from your own efforts online. And if you're that, you don't need my freaking help, right? So for most people, friends and connections are much more reliable than those things. As to which artists inspire me the most, too many. I'm usually fixated on a new handful of artists every few months, but when I think of the ones I've returned to over the longest timelines, it's usually Frank Frazetta, John Singer Sargent, William Blake, Ernst Fuchs, Gustave Doré and his engravers, Wes Burt, Ahmed Al-Duri, Ryan Meinerding, Marco Djurdjevic, Alan Williams. The longer the list gets, the more I realize it's too short. There's a lot of amazing artists out there. Thanks again, Paula. Damien in the Den says, my question is, I've recently finished college and I'm currently trying to get a job. So I was wondering, how was your experience after finishing college, getting into the industry and the art world as a graduate? Or if you have any tips that could help me. Thanks again, Steven. Thank you, Damien. Glad to have helped. If I had to give one tip to a recent graduate, I would say keep your network tight. Keep up with your friends, see what's up with them, don't fade away. And especially don't fade away if you don't get a job and then get insecure about it. That starts a vicious cycle that requires redoubled efforts to recover from. Remember, no one is triangulating your status in the post-graduation hierarchy with more precision than you. The art world is weird and hard, and it's not one thing. Every little corner of it is different, and that's why it's art. So don't presume to know where you stand. I got my very first freelance gigs during school off of some random art test online. It was a short thing, and I don't know how often stuff like that happens anymore. I got my first real art job from a recommendation from my friend Ahmed. I was a pretty meaty goddamn ochre artist, and I almost lost that job before I randomly got put on the right kind of project the week before I was going to be let go, and they changed their mind. And then I wound up working for them for years and years. So keep your friends close, stay in touch with your connections and your cohort. They really are, in my estimation, the biggest benefit of going to an art school. There's no overestimating the importance of that. So keep them close. Keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer, because your enemies tend to get the jobs you want, right? Cheers, Damien. Thanks for the question. Burning Bacon 123 says, my question is, what is your number one tip for artists? Ah, Burning Bacon 123. You ask the hardest of questions, don't you? If I had to give just one tip, I would say, don't be so sure. Don't be so sure that your teachers are right. Don't be so sure that you are. Don't be so sure that you know whether your art is good or bad, and don't be so sure that you know what it takes to improve. Don't be so sure that you need to be harder on yourself, and don't be so sure that you don't have what it takes. I see a lot of certainty in art talk. Certainty for which I often see no evidence, and instead find multitudes of contradictory evidence. I'm not sure you couldn't become an incredible artist if you just shut up and weep with joy over every mark. Maybe someone should try it. Thanks, Burning Bacon. Willis says, I would have a question about whether practicing many random subjects is effective, because I always see myself approaching completely different subjects every day, like character design, landscape, then objects or random studies, since I have a difficult time approaching constant and focused practice on determined practices. Thanks for the question, Willis. Yes, that kind of study is absolutely effective, but it's effective at what it is, a generalized view of many subjects. So if your goals align with that, let's say that you want to make finished pieces that are complete scenes which contain a character and a landscape holding an object, then as diffuse as your study is, it remains quite on the nose for your end goal. But I know it can be hard to know exactly what you want to head towards. In my experience, most artists are loath to claim their ambitions because they're frightened that putting things so simply would make it too real either to themselves or to others. And if others know what we want to do, then they can better sharpen the axe of their judgment, etc., etc., etc. All the useless crap artists spend their creative energy on instead of their drawings. For sure. If your goal is to make the sickest drawings of cars, then yes, every moment of studying anything other than cars seems to demand a little bit more justification, right? But even that is a closed-minded view. Some of the most famous painters of car ads from the 50s and 60s, for example, were considered the best because they didn't suck at the people and the trees like everyone else did. So you can use whatever you get good at to your advantage further on down the road, and you just need to apply it creatively. I'd also say, if you have a difficult time approaching the same subject matter in a focused way over and over, don't push it. Like, who's asking you to push it? If changing subjects often keeps your energy up, that's worth more than anything else most of the time. Discipline is only useful up to the point that it makes you quit, or makes you bored, or makes you burnt out. And don't think that you're above quitting. Even if you are, it's unwise to think that way. It's important to follow the energy in your practice. Do whatever keeps you interested and at the drawing board, and don't worry about it so much. Consider as time moves on if you're interested in moving from being a process-focused artist to an object-focused artist. To clarify, a process-focused artist is the kind whose first thoughts about their practice are, I'm in a study period, I'm trying to get better, this is my current art workout routine, thoughts like that. You're thinking more about how you do art and less about what or why. And an object-focused artist is an artist whose first thoughts about their practice are more like, I want to make a piece about this idea, or I want to make this kind of piece for this particular reason. You focus on individual pieces and what they need, subordinating the importance of yourself and your other work. You can oscillate, of course, changing what kind you are from day to day, but keep an open mind to the possibility of switching. You can do that with some conscious effort, and chance may have you in one category right now, but you may find the other more freeing, more healthy for your mind and for your temperament. Thanks again, Willis. Stardust Observer asks, what are some aspects of drawing you can only learn from observing them yourself, rather than just knowing a lot of theory and mileage? Thanks for the question, Stardust Observer. I think the part of art that can be learned through theory is pretty small, minuscule even. If that weren't the case, all art schools should be successfully turning out killer artists with clockwork regularity. Stop leaving your diplomas on my desk. Mileage, I'm more unsure about. As far as I know, no one has proven that dedicated, isolated mileage over long timescales won't make you a happy artist, if not a master. I'm very open to the idea that you can indeed just draw your way to enjoying your own work and having it be enjoyed by others as long as you're not rushing. But yeah, there's so much you need to learn and decide for yourself that no one else can hand you, not the least of which is how you create your support structure around your practice. Who will bear witness to the pain and exuberance of your practice? How will you manage your energy? How will you regulate your emotional states? What are your internal and external goals? How capable are you of insisting on a particular inner balance as you work? Do you even think that's possible? Will your art practice instead be driven by whether you're randomly having a good day or a bad day? These things only seem tangentially related to drawing. They actually are the drawing. They're the same thing. Like everything in life, a universe of conditions determines what will happen with your art. A universe of such scope that it is impossible for any individual to map all of the affecting conditions, but that is the truth, nonetheless. Anyway, that's all the real art. Everything that isn't that stuff is the stuff that everyone else can easily come to know. And no one loves art for the part of it that's the same as everyone else's, right? Everyone loves it for the idiosyncratic parts, the different parts. Thanks again, Stardust. Now, I think I answered all of the direct pointed questions that I got from my 10K community post. If I didn't answer yours, it wasn't on purpose, it was an oversight. I apologize for that. I was trying to answer all of them. But I want to thank everyone who responded without questions as well. I got a lot of just very kind comments on that, but I tried to focus on the questions, and even on the questions for the sake of the video, I edited out anything that was just kind words and just left the question. But let me just say that I'm very humbled by all of the kindness that you guys have shared, and the idea that I have helped directly with your art practices is trippy, to say the least. Life is extremely weird. Life is wild. And I'm sorry that I don't have time to respond to every comment on the videos these days. Things are growing here and they kind of start rolling in. But I want to let you all know that I do read most of your messages. I get the emails with all of the comments, and I take a couple minutes to skim through them all when they've piled up. So I'm seeing most of what you're all saying, and I really appreciate it, including the mean ones. Good on you. I'm glad you've got so much piss and vinegar in you. May it produce a bounty of drawings. So let me just say again, in the most heartfelt way, thank you for being here. I'm very humbled to have reached 20K with this kind of material and to have shared my thoughts and my art with all of you. And yeah, thanks for drawing today.